This is my 1983 Yamaha XJ650 Maxim. I acquired this from a good friend who had purchased it off of Facebook Marketplace for $1,000. The owner was selling it as not running, but my friend was able to get it to make some sparks by spraying in some carb start. He removed the air filter, sprayed it in. He got it to idle for a little bit and knew that it was salvageable. So when I got this bike, my friend had already removed the carburetors here. What I did was I totally rebuilt it. I used information on the internet from various YouTube videos and also XJBikes.com. And one of the big things to do here is you use a hair dryer or gently with a heat gun in order to soften up all the rubber before you take those off. So I did a complete rebuild of the carburetor, replacing all of the rubber parts, the butterfly vacuum seals, the bowl gasket, very important, the float bowl needles. I followed an entire process in order to clean that, check all the passages, check the diaphragms. I did have to purchase a few needles from XJ Forever. Sorry, some jets, because the ones that were in there were out of spec. I wanted to bring these all back to factory spec. The carburetor rebuild took quite a bit of time. The one thing I'll really say about this bike is that if you find something like this from somebody and maybe it's not running, or even if it's running, it is a total DIY project. You're going to need to do this all yourself. Local shop, they charge $200 an hour for any bike that's older than 1998. Maybe that's just the market that I'm in, but when they get old, they have to do a lot of research to figure these things out unless they're experts on that series. So in any event, so as I mentioned, I rebuilt the carburetor. One of the things that was suggested and I did was I pulled the valve covers off and I checked the valve gap. I did have to replace, basically swapping, I think it was 4 to 5 shims in order to get it all set up. I had to purchase one shim. That was not that expensive. Like I said, it's more time consuming than anything. Put in new spark plugs. The tank had some rust on the inside, so I pulled the entire tank. Found out that the petcock that has 2 tubes, one for the reserve and one for normal running, they have a little bit of a screen on them. Those tubes were off, so the previous owner was sucking in all the rust from the tank coming down into the carbs, and man, the filters that were in each carb, there's 1 filter per carb, those things were just nasty. 2 of them were just pretty much clogged up. I did end up putting in a manual petcock. Normally these are tied to one of the vacuum ports on the intake boots, so that when you start it up and a vacuum is produced, that'll make the petcock actually run. I ended up putting in a manual one for right now. I've got some see-through, translucent, I'll say, fuel tubing that's rated for gasoline. Then I've got a rock filter there, so I can see the rock filter. I can see whether or not it's flowing for gas. I've had no trouble with this since putting this in. That, you know, I like the idea of getting in a filter here before the filters that's inside the carbs. Other things that I did to the bike, I added in this engine guard, aka crash guard. I did rebuild the master cylinder. That was in pretty bad shape. The fluid that was in there was not only needing to be replaced, but the master cylinder was just pretty nasty when I took it apart. I replaced the brake lines. If it's got original brake lines, you definitely should be replacing your brake lines. I put in some of these metal brake lines on here, and then I rebuilt the caliper. In my case, the caliper piston was so pitted that it was not usable, so I had to purchase a new piston from XJ Forever. That worked pretty good. And rebuild kits, you can get them from XJ Forever, or you can also get them from other places. If you pull everything apart and you see what you need, quite often that's better than just trying to find something on eBay or whatever, because a lot of times they'll use a number like a yeah, an XJ650, but it will be for a different version or a different year. So I think it's always best to pull things apart, take your time, see what you got in order to make sure you're ordering the right stuff. This bike, the tires were already pretty good. They were dated 2020. The previous owner apparently put only 250 miles on the bike after, I guess, deciding that he wanted another bike. I did a little bit of rust remediation on the chrome. The handlebars were kind of a little bit of a rust flaked, and so you just take some water and some aluminum foil and you can just scrub that up and the rust comes off. Research that on the internet right there. Chrome rust remover, aluminum foil. On the first test ride, the speedometer had a scream of death. It was just whining really, really good. The folks on XJ Bikes helped me out here. I had to disassemble this speedometer assembly and then remove all the cruddy oil that was on the inside, replace it. By the way, this bike has 25,000 miles plus on it. And let's see, so far 200, I've got the trip set to 259. I think I put about 100 miles on it before I had reset it and then left it there. So I've already put more miles on it than the previous owner had on it. Other things that I did, I put extra brake lights on here that flash. They blink and flash as you're hitting the brake lights. I did obviously a complete oil change. This is cool. This stuff is from Walmart, 17 bucks for a whole gallon. That's great. This makes that makes the parts that you have to do, sorry, I should say, makes what you have to do to this bike a lot cheaper. I have not changed out the oil in here, but I did look at it and it was actually overfilled. So I pulled a little bit out. So I do plan on changing the oil here. I took the whole back end off and I checked the brake pads. I'd already ordered the brake pads even though they were in usable shape, so I ended up replacing those. I had done that after my friend had done a quick test ride with the after the carb got the engine running again, and he said the bearings were so smooth that it wasn't worth replacing. Some people will replace the bearings. The tire tread was pretty good. That's one thing you got to look at because that's money right there. What else did I do here? Oh, I did a little bit of sanding on the aluminum. I just thought it looked a little bit ratty. I didn't make it polished or anything like that. I just didn't want it to look too much better than the rest of the bike. One thing I'll say about this bike, with it being a 4-cylinder, it runs very smooth. And with the work that I did on the carburetor, making sure that the fuel enrichment passages were good, making sure that the jets were all to stock, making sure that everything was clean, made sure I had no leaks in the vacuum, new spark plugs, the valves were to spec. This engine runs very smooth. You know, I get it up to highway speeds, and I duck my head down underneath this windshield so I can listen to just the engine, and it's just purring along, very smooth. I have no idea how it compares right now for the power compared to new, but I'm happy with the way that it's running and the way it's idling. One comment here is, compared to a lot of modern bikes, you look at this seat, look at this cushion. It is so soft, okay? And with the shocks, the way that they're broken in, this is a very comfortable bike. These mini apes, this is very comfortable. When I'm sitting on this bike, I mean, let's see here. When I'm just sitting here and I got my hands on this, it is just very, very comfortable. Riding this comfort is great. I also have a Sportster and also a Triumph Bonneville, and honestly, this bike is the most comfortable one that I have right now, okay? It is the oldest though. I'm not sure I would go and take it on a 3-hour trip or not, but I've ridden this bike so far. Probably my longest ride was an hour out someplace and ending up back at the house. I've been kind of trying to just inch my way forward and bringing it further and further away from the house. The brakes, you know, you got rear drum brakes on here, and you've got this pivoting caliper design. So instead of the caliper kind of squeezing, it kind of rotates and pivots. So you do have to press a little bit hard on the front brake in order to get it to grab. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it keeps you from jerking that front brake and getting a high side flip. I think I mentioned that I de-rustified the tank with vinegar. So I purchased some BBs and some small nails. Both the BBs and the nails were ferrous, which meant that when I was done with the vinegar, I could remove it with a magnet. So what the vinegar does is the vinegar softens up all the rust that's on the inside, and then you can get a lot of the rust out just by doing that. I have not done any kind of a tank seal. I thought it was going to be okay the way it was. I did add this windshield. It's like $100 for this windscreen. It helps with the riding it when it was cold. I first rode this while it was still winter around here, and I acquired it sometime at the end of November, which was a good thing for me. I wasn't rushed. I could do a whole bunch of work to it over the winter when it really wasn't riding season, and get everything going. Yeah, the previous owner didn't even put these cotter pins. I had to add those cotter pins here, right there. Whoever worked on these tires didn't put the doggone cotter pins in. What else can I say? I will also say these mirrors are great because I can see behind me pretty well. They're out to the side good enough. That's the cool thing about this. But I think the one thing I wanted to mention mostly is if anybody's looking up XJ650 and they want to find reviews for it or something like that because they found one used, you have to be mechanically inclined. You have to be handy. You have to be willing to put in the research and the time in order to figure out what's going on with these bikes, because there is going to be stuff wrong with them. There's going to be twice as much as what you think there's going to be. That's what I expected. I looked at what I thought was going to be wrong with it, and I said to myself, you know, I bet you there's going to be twice as much wrong with it, and I bet you there's going to be twice as much money that I'm going to have to put into it. And that's pretty much about what it was. So of the $1,000 that I bought it, my buddy had already bought a rebuild kit. I ended up getting a different one, and he had put a battery in there. He had put an air filter in there. You know, like I said, you know, what did I spend money on? Vinegar, BBs, a little bit of oil. I bought this here, piston, rebuild kit, brake lines. Let's see what else. I had to buy a shim, plugs, rebuild kit for this, some jets, filter, some what do you call it, fuel line. I had to buy that. Had to buy the oil, and then I had to buy some different grits of sandpaper that I didn't already have. I added this brakes, that was a little bit extra. The brake lights, extra brake lights here, and the little module that's on the inside under the seat to pulse the brake lights. What else? That was pretty much it. It was more time than it was money. But if you think you're gonna find one of these things for $500 and put $200 into it to get it to work, good luck. You're a much better person than I was, or you cut corners. But it altogether, I'm thinking it was somewhere around 40-50 hours that I spent. If it wasn't researching and reading, it was doing something, fiddling it with it, pulling apart, doing it again. It was a lot of time, but I feel like I've earned my way for this bike, and I can tell you right now, as it stands, even if I don't have room for it, I'm not selling it. So let's see if we can go for a ride here. Yeah, well, I'm getting my jacket on and everything. I'm gonna start this up. So, ignition, and I gotta make sure that I turn the fuel on. Switch. And fuel enrichment. It says choke here, but it's fuel enrichment. It actually adds fuel. It doesn't choke off the air. And so I am in neutral. Starts right up. And since it has the the fuel enrichment, then the RPMs are going to kind of climb. Okay, the RPMs are climbing. I think the manual says depending upon the temperature, you want to keep it running for a certain period of time and then back off and just keep it running a little bit higher for a little bit until you let it warm up. I'm going to let it warm up while I put my jacket on, and let me stop the camera. Let that idle down a little bit. If you can go from idling to get a little throttle, which is not quite warmed up yet, then it will be warmed up. Okay, I think she's warmed up enough. Bike has self-canceling turn signals. It goes by distance and time. There's another bike right there. And I like to be the last one in the line. It's all warmed up now. This bike clutch is a lot more different than my other one. Like I said, I rode the Sportster last, and the clutch just grabs. An interesting thing about this bike is that it was, if you can see, the speedometer is got a red line at 55 miles an hour. Since it was back in the 80s, highway speed max was 55 miles an hour. So that is 5 gears, and that somewhat affects the gearing. I will not say you can't go, 70 miles an hour, but the gearing's a little bit different for this bike, because it's an 80s bike. They weren't going that fast, or shouldn't have been going that fast on the highway. More people out for a ride. One thing that I have noticed is that this speedometer is off by about 2-3 miles an hour at about 40 miles an hour, 50 miles an hour. I guess that's keeping me honest. There I go again. Not used to this clutch in this bike right now. I gotta let that clutch out a little bit more. The other thing I've noticed with this bike is because of the gearing, and I think I've downshifted enough, I'm really in a higher gear than I thought I was in. people trying to yield to me on the circle. That's stupid. I appreciate it, but I want people to exercise their right of way. Say this, with this windshield, when I'm at highway speeds, there's a lot of wind buffeting going on with my helmet. Can't wait till the weather gets warmer. Take that thing off. Just deal with the wind on my chest. Intersection. People want to cut into my lane, turning left. People coming from my left really fast. Are they going? Are they turning? They won't use their turn for me. Do not stall. Yeah, one more thing. The Schrader valve that was on the air fork, so you have to put some compressed air in there, up to like 17 psi, otherwise these forks really collapse. You can see I put a little indicator on there, put a little wire tie to see how much those forks go down. And if you don't have pressure in there, these front forks are like jello. That's another thing about this bike. Once again, is this a beginner bike? I wouldn't say it's a great for a beginner bike, but it's like if you want to get a bike and spend a bunch of time on it, and you're not afraid to throw all the money that you put into it away in case things don't work out, you can always part out the parts. You know, these carburetors go for, you know, 150 bucks on eBay. There's a lot of parts that are on here. People might sell the caliper for 30-40 bucks, you know, to be rebuilt by somebody. There's a lot of parts on here that people are dying for, that if you're good on eBay and you buy one of these bikes, doesn't work out, you can just part things out. But I've been happy with this bike. Got me back into riding. Got me to buy some other bikes afterwards, and it's been fun.